has someone else done this who I think is an absolute moron, you know, then why can't I?
Entrepreneur.
The new generation of creators making their mark. Please welcome
Yasin. Is there something that you are inherently passionate about then?
The craft of getting better as a storyteller, that's the thing that gets me up in the morning. Everyone wants to have six-pack abs and like get up at 5 a.m. to make sure you get shit done. Make the stakes higher. And I was running like semi-professionally, and then I got hit by a car, so I had to stop that. And then I was like playing guitar and like doing jingles for radio. And then I got nodules. And if I can't pursue music, then I might as well like just die. And I eventually became homeless.
Do you recall, was there like a specific point that caused the turnaround?
One thing I didn't understand at the time was that I had ADHD. And so I had absolutely no tools to deal with what was happening in my brain.
I start all my podcasts with the same question because usually I believe it sets a certain narrative for the rest of the conversation. And that question is, are you happy?
I don't know. It fluctuates.
Mm-hmm.
It fluctuates massively, depending on whether I've achieved a goal or in the midst of the goal or very far away from a goal that I've set. So right now, I'll do it on a scale because I think that's easier. Maybe like a 7 out of 10.
Okay. Do you believe we should chase happiness?
Yeah, for sure. I think like, what else is there? I think it's purpose, happiness.
I've had a few discussions where people, in their opinion, claim that happiness is not necessarily something you can chase. It's always an after-the-fact result, and that's why they say they wouldn't chase happiness.
Yeah, so to me, it's more like we go around the world doing things with very little idea about why we're doing them, you know, what our intention is, like what our desired outcome is. And I think if we were to stop and sit and say, what is the goal of life? It's probably happiness and purpose. But oftentimes we move away from those things in the pursuit of things other people tell us that we should pursue, or society tells us we should pursue. Like maybe it's working like a dog and making loads of money at like an oil company, or, you know, whatever else it is. Like when really we'd be happier if we were knitting in the countryside or whatever it is. I don't think you can actually achieve contentment or happiness just by doing things that are lovely. I think we do need to be stretched, and we should feel stress sometimes, and we should try and grow and seek purpose as well as happiness. But that doesn't mean that we have to all follow the same routes and do the same things. And I think that's why I would say you should intend to seek happiness or find happiness, because long-term happiness, right?
Yeah.
Not like scrolling on TikTok happiness, but like contentment. Like you should seek that out, because if you're not intentionally seeking, then you may get way off the path.
Yeah. I think you're describing, I'm reading The Pathless Path at the moment. Have you read it by any chance?
No.
Okay. So the way he describes it is that people chase prestige instead of the things that actually make them happy. You mentioned the term purpose already. For this particular podcast, I have a research hypothesis that I use sort of to guide certain conversations. And that hypothesis is that passion equals purpose. What's your thoughts on that?
Passion equals purpose. Yeah, I'll go with that. I mean, I think like you could have something that you are passionate about and not get purpose from it. So if we're being pedantic, then I don't think it always equals that.
Right.
I think it has to be something that you are dedicating your life to. You know, you can have like passions that you do just in the evening, but they don't give you a sense of purpose, maybe.
Yeah.
So I think it has to be that like 1, 2, 3 things maximum that you're like I'm going all in, and I want to like see an outcome in the world or in myself because of what I'm doing.
Right.
I'd say that, yeah. And then if for me, I think our purposes should align with like some set of ethical values, but a lot of people don't see it that way and find purpose in things that I think are highly unethical. So I think it just, different folks, different strokes.
Is there something that you are inherently passionate about then?
Yeah, I love creating content and storytelling, and the craft of getting better as a storyteller. That's the thing that I think gets me up in the morning and makes me feel excited. Like, I don't think I'm there yet, but that pursuit of like getting to a place where you can tell a story that captivates like people all around the world, regardless of whether they're usually interested in what you're talking about. Maybe you're talking about bread or cheese or stockings or, whatever it is. And most people would be like, that's kind of boring. But because of the way you build the story, they do find it fascinating. I saw one on TikTok the other day of like a goat's cheese from some part of Sicily, and I was just like, whoa. And it had millions and millions of views because ultimately storytelling, if done well, is a universal thing, and it bridges the gaps between like experience and interest and the things beneath that, like what it says about what it means to be a human and all of this.
It's somehow, I remember watching a video on YouTube of a guy who was trying to prove that you can make a Netflix documentary about anything, and he ended up making one about toast.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, it was somehow that one comes to mind, that indeed it's at some point if you get good enough at it, you can tell a good story about anything.
Yeah.
Where does that particular passion originate from for you?
Yeah, I honestly don't know. I loved watching YouTube.
Okay.
I can't say I was a kid because I don't think it came out when I was a kid, but as a late teenager, I was like obsessed with it. Yeah, I think it came from that, like seeing these other people do it and seeing what they were able to create and just thinking, I want to do that. And I've always loved teaching, and I think I want to find the cross section between education and entertainment through the use of storytelling. That's the thing for me that I think bridges the gap, right? And so, yeah, I love like when I put together a video and people are like, this really helped me. Like I never understood this before. Now I understand it. That's kind of where I want to get to, but I don't know where it came from.
No, fair enough.
And maybe some like egotistical wanting to be like seen by lots of people. I'm sure some of that is in there too.
Yeah. What I find fascinating about you mentioning that you're becoming a storyteller, that's at least one of the main ways that I found that ended up being over LinkedIn. And I believe the first story that I saw was your betting money on trying to reach a certain amount of followers in a certain amount of time. And then another story of yours that sticks out more recently is the one about your ADHD suffering.
Yeah.
And for me personally, as someone who's now been following you for a little bit, I'm already seeing that progression. So maybe to go to the first story, what was your sort of ambition with that one? And just for those that didn't read it, obviously summarize the story, if you will. I
think like I've always found that if you really, really, really want to get something done, then there has to be something at stake. Like everyone wants to have 6-pack abs and like get up at 5 a.m. and, stop drinking or start drinking more or, whatever it is. We all have different goals, but most of the time our goals go unmet, like year after year after year, because our intentions aren't strong enough to like set up the strategies and the tools around us that ensure that we get it done.
Yeah.
And so one of the ways I've found to be like, to make sure you get shit done is to like give someone money or like just set the stake, makes the stakes higher. So like if you screw up, if you don't follow through, then you're gonna really feel the pain. And so you're moving toward that like positive goal of like, it'll be great if I like hit 10K in 30 days and if I had some consistency with TikTok, but it would also be really shit if I had to pay like £1,000 to all these people. Yeah. So it's that combination of like running towards something and running away from something that I think works pretty well, at least in the short term, because after I did that, so I hit 30K in 30 days in the end. And most of that growth came in the last like 10 days. But then I just like pretty much stopped posting until late January this year. So I think that was in September last year.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to achieve a goal in the short term, something like that's really helpful. But you have to be careful that that outcome isn't the overall goal. And I think for me it was. And then I just felt deflated. I didn't even feel excited when I hit it. I was grateful that I didn't have to pay a bunch of money out. Yeah. But I was also like, okay, it's done. Mm-hmm. And then I just didn't have any momentum left to keep posting. So I think like with stuff like that, you need to have an even bigger goal that keeps you going. And I didn't have that. I hadn't thought further than that. So that's just some advice I'd give.
Have you then figured out what your goal now is, the bigger goal? Or are you still working on it? Or
yeah, so my goal now is to build out a massive TikTok community, TikTok, Instagram, like short form video, basically. It's very early days, so I'm still working on the like USP and all of that. But I want a place where amazing creators can come together and get feedback on all the content they produce, on the scripts they write, on their hooks, and then like a place where we're all learning together. Mm-hmm. And what inspired this was a Mr. Beast video. Well, he says it a lot, where he's like, I had 10,000 followers, and then I got together with another 4 people who had 10,000 followers, and we would meet every day and just talk about YouTube. And within a year, we all had 1 million followers. And I was like, whoa. And he's like, you learn 4 times faster because you have all this additional feedback coming in that you wouldn't have got before. Yeah. And though he doesn't say this, another thing that I thought was positive about that was that a lot of the time when I'm making my content, I'm like, does this make sense? Is this actually the right order? Is this the way the story should be told, you know? Mm-hmm. And when you're telling a story, you have so much context, right? Because you're inside your head. So like you're filling in all the gaps. And anytime something's boring, you still think it's so fucking fascinating because you've written it, right? Yeah. And when you hear from other people, like, you know, I gave you some feedback on some videos before, you're hearing all the stuff that you could never tell yourself. Yeah. Because you made it, you know, like, so getting the feedback from outside gives you a context that you couldn't otherwise have, and a perspective you couldn't otherwise have. And that's like,
and in my case also can humble you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm trying to think so there's the, is it not doppelganger, Dunning-Kruger effect, which is basically like people think, when they first start something, let's say you play guitar for 4 weeks, you're like, yeah, I know like 80% of everything it means to be a guitarist, you know? And then like 10 years later, you will have lower confidence than the person who's just started, but you'll be closer to like knowing how good you actually are. Yeah. So our perception when we don't know much is like off the charts. We think like, oh, the gap between me and like Mr. Beast is like teeny tiny, you know, when actually it's like colossal. Yeah. And I think sometimes the feedback sort of surfaces that, and that's like extremely painful, you know, because like, you get this flash of, oh fuck, I'm way further back than I thought I was. But yeah, I'm with TikTok and Instagram and stuff like this, I see a lot of people who have an expectation that they should be good right away, you know. And people will be like, hey, I've posted 4 videos, I've not gone viral, like, am I shadow banned? And I'm like, well, no, your content's probably just not good enough. That's like the obvious answer. You've posted 4 videos, why would you be good enough? Yeah. And they're like, how dare you, like the content's definitely good enough. I'm like, I mean, yeah, I mean, one in a million people that just come out of the womb and they're like good enough.
Yeah, you know? Exactly.
But yeah, so I think the overarching goal is build this massive community so that everyone's learning quicker. And it's like, it helps me too, because I'm still in this process of trying to figure it out. And ultimately, I want to be like a really massive creator that has massive influence, and can positively change the world. Yeah. And so if I'm getting that information and also educating others, which only helps solidify my own knowledge, then that's good for me and good for them.
Would you then, so obviously you end up starting this particular group. Would you say you've always been okay with accepting feedback yourself? Because that's definitely something I struggled with at first, and I think I'm getting better at it, but occasionally it still hurts. Of actually taking in the feedback.
I think I've always been good at feedback. Yeah. I don't know why.
Giving or taking it?
It's easy to give feedback. To take feedback, I've always been good at receiving it.
Right.
Like, for instance, I'll always ask my partner for feedback on my videos. This like, now that I have a lot of other creators that are giving me feedback, and I have like multiple meetings a week and masterminds and stuff like that, I don't lean on her as much. But back in the day, I would lean on her, and it was actually really useful because she has no interest in marketing.
Right.
She works in the NHS, like just is like, what the fuck is it? And it's kind of boring and all of this stuff, which is perfect because that's how most people on TikTok or wherever else are perceiving your content. You know, it's like, what you have to like, you know, really snap them out of it. And yeah, most of the time I couldn't do that. Most of the time she's like, oh God, I have to watch another one of your videos. And it's it's really boring. And she'd give me feedback and I would react like, I'm not saying it didn't hurt. It would. I'd be like, oh, like I spent 2 days editing this video. Less so on TikTok because I don't spend as much time on it. But when I was trying to do YouTube, and I'd spend maybe a whole week editing a video, and she'd go, like, yeah, it's okay. I'd be like, oh.
Yeah, that's not what I wanted to hear.
But, and then so she started seeing my reaction and going, I'm just gonna, it looks good, you know? And I'm like, no. It hurts because I've put in that amount of time, but I still want the honest feedback because that's how I get better. So like, ignore the reaction in the moment because I want to get better. That's the goal. And if I was better, I'd be getting the views I wanted. So I know something's wrong. It just still stings, you know? It's like, I might be bleeding out, and getting like some stitches might hurt more in the short term than just continuing to bleed out.
Exactly.
I'm going to go do it because that's a smart thing to do. Now I have ADHD and I actually probably wouldn't. I'd probably just bleed out. But as an analogy.
Before we sort of dive a little bit more then into what you're doing now, seems like maybe a random switch, but what were your 20s like?
Really tough, I would say. I mean, lots of highlights, but pretty tough. I traveled for a few years. I went to New York and then Australia, and that was fun. And then I came back. I decided I wanted to be a runner and a musician. So I'm half Algerian, so I'm like, I have the gift of the running.
Right.
And I was running like semi-professionally, and then I got hit by a car, so I had to stop that. And then I was like playing guitar and like doing jingles for radio and stuff like that. And I wanted to like pursue that. So I moved back from Ireland to London to do that. And then I got nodules. Like I was getting like, I'd sing and then my throat would start bleeding, and so I'd get tonsillitis. And so my world was like crumbling around me because I really wanted to be a musician. And then, you know how like when footballers like break their hip or something and then they start like snorting coke and, you know, gambling away all their money, and that I kind of had a similar thing, but my own version of that.
Right.
Which was more like disengagement. I felt very sort of like, I don't know what to do now. And I don't want to do anything, and I don't want to work in retail or restaurants or a call center. I just don't want to do it. And if I can't pursue music, then I might as well like just die. Like, and I wasn't suicidal or anything, but I was just like, it's just not
nothing
I just
to wake up for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I became like kind of a bit of a socialist. There's a book. Sorry, I hurt my neck at the gym.
Okay.
But there's a book here called, I can't remember what it's called, something like Saved, which sounds like a book about Jesus, but it's actually a book about money and how it like ruins relationships and stuff like that, and how to get away from it. So I started becoming a bit of a socialist and trying to like completely disengage from like society and capitalism and all of this stuff. It didn't work out for me, and I eventually became homeless.
Right.
And so when I say my 20s were tough, I'm mainly talking about like that period of like slow decline toward homelessness and then becoming homeless. And
why did that end up happening?
Well, because I was unwilling to engage. There was a few things, like I was trying to make some stuff happen. Like I was trying to make a podcast grow and stuff, and I was unwilling to get work, and then I was bad with money, and I didn't want to get like a retail job or whatever. And then I was like self-sabotaging as well. Like I remember there was this job where it was a copywriting job. I did like it was for some sort of cat bingo or something like that.
Okay.
It was apparently really big, but like they were like, yeah, we want a copywriter, someone who's good with puns and stuff like that. And I love puns, so I just like smashed it. Like there was just so many cat puns. It was good. And they were like, yeah, we fucking love it. We'd love to like, you know, get you in and have a conversation. And if that goes well, we'll hire you. And I just like didn't really check the address. I sort of just like looked at the first bit and was like, all right, Piccadilly Circus. And it wasn't. It was like 2 hours away from where I thought it was.
Right.
And so then I like lied and was like, my sister is getting, or my sister's partner is trying to, you know, propose to her, and he forgot the ring at my house and he's now at the airport, so I need to go give it to them and blah, blah, blah. And then they responded and they were like, this is either absolute bullshit, but such a good excuse, or it's an amazing story. Either way, like, no worries, let's rearrange. And then I just didn't respond to them. And it was like this kind of stuff. Like I was just like self-sabotaging because I just didn't want to do any of that stuff. So, and then I like broke up with my partner and stuff like that. And she was like paying more of the bills at the time. So it just, it was like slow degradation down into this like homelessness. And it was fully on me. But I think one thing I didn't understand at the time was that I had ADHD. And so I had absolutely no tools to deal with like what was happening in my brain. And my life did turn around without me finding an awareness of those symptoms being ADHD. But I think it would have been much easier if I'd known at the time. Yeah. But yeah, that's kind of how it happened. And then I was like in between houses and like, you know, going to friends' houses. I remember I spent like, I had £100 and I spent £70 on Trusted House Sitters, which is like a website where you like look after people's dogs in exchange for staying at their house. And it's such a stupid website because they don't actually let you see the houses or anything without paying. And I couldn't see like, is this a good website? Am I actually going to be able to get some? And it's like 70% of all my money. But I was like, okay, I have no other option. I will literally be on the streets. So I wasn't sleeping rough, but I was like, I had all my stuff like a, like a traveling man, and I'd like 3 suitcases, a guitar and stuff like that, and I'd just be like moving around.
Do you recall, was there like a specific point that caused the turnaround, or?
So while I was homeless, I was working a job, and then eventually I was like, I emailed my parents. I don't know why I chose email. I think it was a bit easier than like calling them up. And I was like, look, I'm like done. I've been trying to get back out, but I just can't because you pay for food and travel and this and that. And I just can't make enough money to pay for a deposit for rent and all of that. Can I come back and like lick my wounds and then go back to London? And they were like, yeah. But our relationship was a bit like fractured at that point because of my like messing around and stuff like that. They said yes. I went back. It wasn't a very positive environment. They didn't really want me there just because they thought like, oh, it's going to make him worse. You know, he's going to become lazier and stuff like that. But then I was chatting to my dad one day. And I think at this point I was like fully in a state of really bad depression. Right. And I was chatting to my dad one day, and he's always been someone who's a bit like, oh, that can't be done. You know, like since I was a child, he would say stuff like, there'd be like, Jackie Chan would say that we watched a documentary. He's like, I do 1,000 sit-ups a day. And my dad went, impossible. And I was like, how do you know? Like, this is his whole life. Surely it's possible. No, it's not. I'd bet £1,000. And so then I trained and I was like, I'm going to show you it can be done in a day. And I did it. And he's like, like your form wasn't good or whatever, you know? So it's like, and he didn't pay me the £1,000. But so that was kind of a theme. Like he'd be saying stuff couldn't be done. And then I'd be trying to prove that it could be. So he was saying, it's impossible at my age to run 10K. I'd need to train for 6 years or something. And I was like, no, you could do it literally tomorrow. It's like in your head. And he's like, no, it's impossible. And I was like, I haven't trained in 6 months. I haven't moved. I haven't gymmed. I haven't ran. I haven't done anything. I could run a marathon tomorrow.
Yeah.
Just because I say I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
He's like, impossible. I bet you £10,000 you can't do it. So then the next morning, and ADHD, so I didn't like take anything with me. It was like the hottest day in Ireland at the time. So I had no sunscreen. I had no water. I didn't eat. I think I had maybe a banana, but I didn't eat properly before it. And I just like went out. It wasn't like a formal marathon. It was like, I'm going to run for 26 point whatever miles. And then I've ran a marathon. So I did that. And I finished at the beach. So I'll rewind a little bit. I was running along and I was like, you know what? I think I'm done with this. This is like extremely painful.
Yeah.
And then I found this like plastic gold medal in the ditch, like in the back arse of Ireland where like no one is, you rarely see litter. Yeah. And it was just like sticking out of the ditch, like a giant like fake one. And I was like, and I picked it up and I put it around my neck. And I was like, okay, I can do this.
Yeah.
And so I started running again. And yeah, then I finished on the beach and I wanted my dad to like record the end so I'd have it. And so I ended up running like an ultra marathon because he's so bad with tech. And he kept going, yeah, go back. I didn't get it. So I was just running back and forth.
Yeah.
And there was these small children just like walking past me, like overtaking me. One kid was like, Daddy, what's wrong with that man? Because my hips tighten up when I run for a long time with no training. So my upper body had just gone like, horizontal. But yeah, so then when I finally finished, I just like burst into tears. Yeah. And I wasn't a big crier. I hadn't, through the whole homelessness thing, or I hadn't really cried. And I just burst into tears. And he's like, my dad's like an Arab, so he's very like stoic. He's like, what are you crying about? And I was like, I literally just finished a marathon with no training. Like, I can do stuff, Yeah. And that sort of gave me the confidence to like realize I actually can do things. And it sort of took me out of that funk. Yeah. And then I started applying for jobs. And then I got a job at GoDaddy. Like flew back to London, it's actually in Surrey. I started working there. And then, yeah, it was just like stacking those little wins then. But that was the massive thing.
If you're anything like me, you may have spent months, to some cases years, trying to figure out what your passion is. You've eventually figured it out and are contemplating making the jump. In doing so, one of the first things you are faced with when building a new business or even being a creator is finances. Now, the select few love this part. I personally do not. So luckily, I'm very proud to announce today that I have a sponsor who is able to fix this problem for you. For the sharp listeners, you may know them from episode 30, Edwin from Moneybird. They decided to sponsor this podcast today. Now, I know that when I started with my business 4 years ago, I was super overwhelmed by all the things I had to do, from sending invoices to doing my taxes. It was all a lot and all very confusing and almost made me stop. Moneybird aims to automate the financial processes, such as sending invoices, such as sending reminders for invoices, such as giving you exactly how you need to fill in your tax overview. So if you're a starting entrepreneur or creator in the Netherlands, I'd absolutely recommend using Moneybird. I'll add the link to their website in the description down below. And with that being said, let's get back into today's show.
Would you say that like this sort of homeless period, that was rock bottom for you?
Yeah.
Would you then also say that it was essential in order to get you to where you are now? Or? No? Why not?
I mean, it depends what you mean by essential, but I think I could have not done that and been where I'm at or much further ahead.
Yeah.
And I've read a study that was saying that like being unable to get a job, like being jobless or being homeless or both, stays with you for your entire life.
Yeah.
Like even if you become uber successful, you're always running away from homelessness. You're always like seeking money for safety and these kinds of things. And I definitely have that, and have to sort of constantly check myself and rewrite and go, okay, what's the actual goal? What do I value? And are these actions aligned with my values? And that can be like super exhausting. I think stressful for my partner as well, because like I can just get stressed about money, even if there's no sense to it, you know, even if we have loads of money or whatever. It's like that, you know, I need more and all of this. So
I have that as well.
Yeah.
At times, not even on purpose, but recently I've had quite a few people on who have ADHD, and they've been telling about certain symptoms. And in some cases I'm like, oh, I recognize that. Or so maybe I should consider getting tested myself. Not sure whether it would change anything, but just out of curiosity purposes.
Yeah. Does it change anything? I think like awareness, I think it does change stuff, but you just have to be careful with it.
Right.
So like labels, I think can make you start making a lot of excuses. You know? Like, oh yeah, sorry I missed your 50th anniversary, mum, like ADHD, you know? Or yeah, sorry I didn't get you a gift for your birthday, partner who's seemingly important to me but ADHD, or you know. And then you can do it in work as well. And like I noticed that when I got diagnosed, it was like it got worse before it got better, because I was like, I felt myself being like, yeah, it's like, you know, it's ADHD. But the awareness means that you start seeking out tools related to that cluster of symptoms, and that is the important thing. And I think like saying, okay, I have this thing and it's bad. I know there's people online on social media that say it's good. I don't think it's good. I think it's bad. But like, we can work around these cluster of symptoms and still have a successful life. And sure, it might come with certain strengths, but I think I wouldn't choose to have it. I wouldn't wish it upon anyone. I think it's challenging. But if you know what those symptoms are and you understand how people give tools and techniques to overcome it, then you can start to like live a life like another person might, like just a normal life where it's affecting you much less than it has before. So I think in that way, understanding that you have it is really helpful.
Yeah. In your explanation of your dad, and also you challenging your dad's beliefs, it sounds a little bit like fixed mindset versus growth mindset. It's kind of funny to me to see then that you go on to create a channel that in itself is already called Startup Growth Tips, but in general you give a lot of advice as far as what it takes to grow and that things are possible. The advice from that you, or the LinkedIn post where you bet money on yourself that you can do it in order to challenge that you can do it.
Yeah.
Do you think sort of that situation at home then with your dad and how that affected you, I guess, is what also led to who you become now? Yeah,
I mean, it's with this kind of stuff, it's no one knows where things come from. So
it's just an assumption.
You know, genetics, environment. I can't piece those things apart and tell you like, I wish I could look into the bonnet and say, it was because of this, or but just for as long as I can remember, I've always had that, like, I can do it, you know? And you can do it, and we can do it. And I don't think that generally, like, so for instance, I think there's a difference between saying pretty much anyone, if they have their mind right, can run a marathon with no training. That's, you know, unless they're in a wheelchair or have some other ailment or disability. But I wouldn't say anyone can be like Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk. So there's limits to what I think is possible. So I'm not like, I think the thing I think is like, okay, tell me what it is. And then based on what I know about myself, do I think it's possible for me to do that? And I think most of the time, I think yes. And like, I think for other people, they don't give themselves enough self-belief that if they really focused on it, they could do it.
Yeah, because that is a little bit at the root of this whole podcast, and also the passion topic. That for myself, the whole quarter life crisis, what that entailed for me was this phase of I'm done with uni. At that point, I did have some work experience, like 1 or 2 years, and I knew I didn't necessarily want to go back to that life full time, right? That it just wasn't for me. The problem was that I didn't know what I did want, or lacked the self-belief in order for me to be convinced enough to say, yeah, I'm going to be able to achieve that. I guess the way, or what point I'm trying to make, the way you describe it there is that depending on your level of self-belief, depends on whether or not you'll achieve. Am I right in summarizing that?
Yeah, definitely. Depending on your self-belief and whether your innate skill sets align with the goal, and make it realistic. Like, I think some things are realistic and other things are less realistic.
Yeah.
And the less realistic it is, the more it requires you to have a certain skill set. So, but I think people just bring the bar too low. So they think it's unrealistic for most people to run a marathon with no training. I disagree. But could most people do the Navy SEALs training, the David Goggins thing? Yeah. Could they do what he's done? No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
So I think it just, it depends. And but I think you have to have a self-awareness in order to know what you can and can't do.
Yeah.
And then you have to think about, like, I think one tool that I often use to figure out whether I can do something or not is, has someone else done this who I think is like an absolute moron,
yeah.
And I did that with work when I wanted promotions, and I focused on this one guy and I just tracked his career.
Yeah.
And he was a real idiot, but very, very charming.
Yeah.
And he did no work, and I was like, okay, if he can like keep rising up every single year, making more and more money and killing it in life, then why can't I?
Yeah.
And I think finding those things in different areas, like we too often look at people that can't do it, so like if you're an old person, you'll look at the many people that aren't running and say, well, I can't run 5K because old people aren't supposed to run, which is what my parents used to do. Now they're like avid runners. But instead, we should look at the 90-year-old who's run a marathon and say, well, how's she done that? And if she can do that, maybe I can run 2 kilometers or 5 kilometers.
Yeah.
And so I've just always tried to focus more on like who's been able to achieve these things. And then if it's something where I have the same skill set, maybe I can achieve as much as them. But if it's something where I don't, maybe I can achieve like 10% of what they have.
Yeah.
And maybe that's still a lot. In a lot of areas of life, 10% is a massive amount.
One of the critical points you mentioned there, though, is understanding your own skill set. Do you have any advice as far as when it comes to understanding your own skill set? Because I think that is actually one of the crucial things that often people miss, because either they're simply not aware of the skills they have, or they underestimate the skills they have.
Yeah. So I have a book on my bookshelf over there called Range, which was really useful to me when I was making my transition from bum to like startup marketer. Because I was like, I'm too late, I can never make it or whatever. And this book basically says there's a strength in like finding your career early, like coming out the womb, looking at a doctor and going, I want to be that. And then just like, that's all you do. There's a strength to that for sure, but it comes with many weaknesses as well.
Yeah.
And they talk about, and there's loads of studies and everything where they talk about how people that have a very meandering path into their final career come with a lot of strengths. They see things like from a different angle, and they bring different experience, and so they're able to break through problems that many other people can't. And I can't remember the exact example, but I've read this book many years ago, but they talk about how like there's some problems that are just unsolvable. No one solved them in math and science and this kind of stuff. And there was this project where they decided to like give the questions out to like your average Joe, like a construction worker, someone working in retail, like a dancer, whatever, like it's people from all walks of life, and just say like, if anyone can get the answer to this, we'll give you £100,000 or £1 million, big rewards. And yeah, they solved shit tons of these incredibly difficult math and other problems like that, because these people were seeing it from different angles. And usually they'd have to explain the problem in a way that was more like analogistic or something, you know, so like using images and stories. And but yeah, like when people have different life experiences, they can solve problems that can't otherwise be solved. So people that find success often have a period where they're rapidly testing, right? So, and some people naturally do this, or some parents will naturally make kids go to dance class and then piano class and then drums and then math and, you know, everything. And other parents will sort of be like, yeah, well, like just go to school or whatever. And in some countries like the US, even at uni, you have to dabble in multiple disciplines, whereas here in the UK at least, and in Ireland, you're like committed for 4 years. And the one where you dabble will lead to better outcomes, because you start to interact with the outside world and get feedback. And it's that feedback that tells you like what your strengths and weaknesses are. And so we will find that the more we test, the more data we get about what we're good at and bad at. And the less we test, the less data we have. And therefore, when we have less data, we're making incredibly inaccurate decisions about who we should be, what we should do. And so the main thing for awareness is test stuff, like actually experience it. And I don't mean like watch a YouTube video or whatever, like try and do the thing. Or if you don't have the time, like go and talk to people that do the thing. And when they're like, you know, like talk to a lawyer, and if they're like, yeah, it's like, you know, I wake up at 6 a.m. and then I work until 1 a.m., you know, and you can ask that person questions like, oh, really? You like do that 5 days a week? And they're like, yeah, pretty much. And I take some Coke to like get through it. But, you know, everyone does that. And they'll tell you the pros and the cons and what sort of characteristics they have that have made them good at the job. And they might say like, I'm extremely organized. And you might already know like, I'm not organized. So maybe you should find something that doesn't require you to be massively organized. So I think like testing stuff. And then the other thing is like having an awareness of when things go well for you and when they go poorly for you, you know? And what set of things trigger one or the other. Like, so, and some of this will come from jobs. It can happen in your personal life. Like maybe you're someone who is really poor at responding to people, or you're always late for events. This is also information about what sorts of roles you'd be good at, right? Like, because you'll meet people that like, they'll sit down at the desk or the table that you're at for dinner, and they'll be like making the like knife and fork perfectly aligned. And then you have people like me that are like, you know, the fork's over here, the knife's up my ass. And then they're like, you know, it's like, so it's like, we all have different personalities. And even like in that seemingly insignificant experience, you can find data that will tell you what, like broadly where you should be going, right? Like that person, I can tell you, and I've seen it so many times where they're like super organized, and I'm like, do you do something like operations or you know, something that relies heavily on organization? That yes, and I love it and I thrive in it. Easy, you know? So like, I think most of the time we find ourselves to be most stressed when we try and we have an idea, you know, like those people that go onto the X Factor when they can't sing and they're like desperately trying to make it. That's like a lack of awareness, you know? And if they'd asked for feedback to like sort it out, like, am I a good singer? What happens when I sing? Do people say, it's been a lovely evening, we got to go now? Or like, are they like, another one, you know? And like, what sorts of people are saying another one? Is it just your
mum?
Your mum? Or is it like, are you getting calls weekly from the local pub or whatever to come back and sing, you know? So like, these indications are everywhere, and we just have to start finding an awareness of them. Like, and this just requires you to go, okay, like, who am I? How do I interact with the world? And by having that awareness, you start to pick up little bits of information. But you can also ask your friends, family. So just to clarify, I'm not saying that you should ask your friends and family what career you should have or job you should have, because they have ulterior motives, right?
Yeah, exactly.
They want to keep you safe. You probably want to take bigger risks because you want a bigger life than that. So it's more, what are the strengths and weaknesses that I have, you know? And when you ask that question, they can't say, your strengths and weaknesses are get a fucking 9 to 5. It's exactly. Like, they'll tell you, you're really stubborn, you're organized, you're conscientious, you're creative, but maybe like you're hard to work with, you're unreasonable, you know, whatever. Like, find your strengths and weaknesses, and they'll even be able to tell you, and they can tell you things other people can't. And then, another way to get feedback is just see how people react when you do certain things. You'll get indications. Like when I was singing, one of the indications that it could be something that I could pursue was people would very frequently be like, please play again, sing again, come back, like, or like cry, you know, or like say that was like incredible, it was profound, whatever. And that was like, okay, I'm not saying this, people are telling me, not people I know, like strangers, you know. Exactly. That's a good indication that I'm good at something. And then I think after you have the awareness of these like disparate things, like I'm good at this, I'm bad at that, I'm good at this, I'm good at that. And I think you want to go higher level. You don't want to be like, I am good at guitar. It's like, what are the things that are required for you to be good at guitar that you are good at? And then you can come up a level, and that allows you to access many more types of jobs. So you don't want to say I'm good at guitar. You want to say maybe I'm creative or I have good timing, because then maybe you could be a musician or a dancer or a, you know, whatever. So you want to look at the higher level skills, and then if you can, try and combine them in ways that give you access to things most people don't have access to, or give you a competitive edge, or put you in an industry that's lucrative, you know. So like you could, maybe you have the strengths that would allow you to be like a knitter or a banker, for instance. If we put ethics aside or whatever, then you should probably do the banking, as long as you have also assessed that you will get the same level of enjoyment from both.
Yeah. So I already told you a little bit about this beforehand, but we're trying to focus a little bit more on speaking specifically to either those who are contemplating starting their own business or becoming a creator.
Yeah.
As someone who has done both, basically, do you have any advice for people who are either be a creator or start a business? Is there any like overlapping advice that you may have?
Overlapping advice is incredibly hard.
Right. Okay. Can also be individual.
It's incredibly hard, like emotionally exhausting.
That is the advice. Sorry, I misunderstood. Okay, yeah.
And you probably need a tribe in order to help you through the ups and downs. The stuff you see on LinkedIn and other places, you know, where like someone who's like 4 years old is like making 200K a month, like maybe that'll be you, probably won't. And if you will be unhappy if that's not achieved in your first 3 months, you'll probably just be unhappy in general. So try and find things that keep you going along the way, and really think about what the reasons why you're doing it in the first place. For instance, for me, I wanted to start my own business because I always liked the idea of having the freedom to be the person who made the final decision. I really like that idea. And I would do really well in companies, and then there'd always be a point where they would make a decision I didn't agree with. And it made me feel out of control, you know, like, oh, well, I think this is bad for the business and we're still doing it. And then that's it.
Yeah, exactly.
And I just have to stick around. And so I always was like, I can't wait to start my own thing. Yeah. And even if the decisions are bad, they're mine. I think also when you are able to create your own schedule, then it allows for someone like me who's like ADHD. So sometimes I'm very switched on, but sometimes I'm like, I don't want to do certain things.
Yeah.
Then doing it for myself is a little easier because I can account for that.
Right.
In a way that's hard to in someone else's company, because you kind of, even in a very flexible company, you still have to fit within that structure. I think other than that, I'm going to try and give separate advice. So for a content creator, I would say try and work with someone who is really good at content, even if they don't pay you a lot. I would do that if I could. And I didn't do that, but I wish I had. I wish I'd gone and worked with like a YouTuber or, someone like that, some sort of creator, storyteller, and just soaked up everything that they knew. And then when I start my own thing, maybe I could on the side be like, hey, like, could you take a look at this? Now I'm getting free advice from like an incredible creator.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Does it have to be, or would you recommend it be relevant to the platform that you're on? Or does that not matter too much? Like if you want to make on YouTube, or work with a YouTube creator, TikTok creator, etc. Or
if you have enough options that you can choose, then I would choose. But ultimately, the platforms will all die eventually.
Right.
And what I'm trying to learn, and what I recommend any creator tries to learn, is how to storytell, and how to like captivate an audience. And I think if you can do that, you can move across platforms and perform well on different platforms. Yeah, I would say that. Like I don't think other than like how long a video might be in order to perform super well, other than that, I think the platforms are relatively similar.
Yeah.
There's definitely differences, but like usually if someone's really good at one, they'll be good at the others.
Yeah.
That's what I've seen. So the main thing is find someone who's good at creating content and storytelling, and find out everything you can, both the like creative side, but the practical side. Like, do they have SOPs? Do they have like certain ways of working that allow them to be more efficient? How do they work with a team? Like, learn everything you can, because one day you're going to need this stuff.
Yeah.
But I think what most creators miss, and many creators never find, is like the frameworks that amazing creators are using in order to like consistently do well. And there are things that they might not even be aware of that they're doing every time. And so you kind of want to uncover those, because it might feel like, oh, if I do it myself, I'll get loads of followers and loads of engagement really quick. Most people do not do that.
Yeah.
And I think if you spent a year or two with some amazing creators, then if you did a year afterwards, it wouldn't be like you missed 2 years and now you're doing 1 year. It'd be like the equivalent of if you tried to figure it out for 10 years or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you're just getting so much information. So I would do that. I would try and get around as many creators as you can, try and get feedback. I genuinely think my community is amazing if you're short form. And these things help for a couple of reasons. One, you learn what is working and what's not working, what you need to improve on. But you also, like, sometimes you'll have periods where your content's not doing what you want it to.
Yeah.
You think, okay, this is a 2 million view video, and you get 20 views, and you're like, oh, it's all over. Like, I want to give up. And by having other creators go, well, honestly, you didn't really put your whole heart and soul into this because there was a typo in the first sentence. And the hook, did you like actually write out 10 other alternative hooks, or was that the first? It was the first one, wasn't it? Yeah, it was the first one. And that sometimes there's ups and downs, like you've seen it before. There was another period, and they just give you the hope to keep going, like, because normal people, and I'm not saying that creators are abnormal, but other people that don't experience this, they cannot comprehend. It's like, it's so weird, that you're like upset because you got 20 views or something, but like it really feels like it's quite painful. So having other people that have the same experience is really helpful.
Yeah.
And then I think, so from having this community, one thing I've learned is that a lot of people don't analyze videos. They like just consume. And I think I've seen with content creators, cinematographers, directors, screenplay writers, like all creatives, they don't just consume stuff. They start getting creative and they start getting curious about why a thing works or doesn't work, you know? So when they, like, for instance, if you're talking about a musician, they'll hear a song and they'll go, "Oh, that made me feel something in my heart."
Yeah.
Why, you know? Okay, yeah, it was in a really unusual timing and they use like this weird drum beat and, you know, they lay it on these different things and you start to like figure these things out. And then when you break down and analyze like that, now you can take elements and apply it to your own creative process. And a lot of people don't do that. So I would suggest doing that from the start. Like, stop consuming stuff. Like, try and be curious about why things make you stop and watch.
Yeah.
What's the sound design like? What captions are they using? What's the hook like? All of these things matter. And if you can see it in other people's, you can start to do it for yourself.
Fair enough. We have a recurring segment on the show where I collected community questions and I put them in this little jar here. And I would like to ask you to take one out, read out both who asked it as well as the question, and then give your opinion on it.
Oh, damn. I'll just leave that open.
Need a new jar.
Read the name first.
Yeah, go ahead.
Tom Grundy. What is one thing you've changed your mind about recently? I don't think there's been anything I've changed my mind on recently because I've just been in business mode.
Something that comes to my mind on your heart is switching to more positive reactions, no?
Okay. Yeah, so everyone gets trolls, and actually trolls are an indication that your video is going to do well, is what I've seen. If a video gets like one or two people going, "You're a fucking twat," or like, "You don't know what you're talking about," I'm usually like, okay, here we go. Like, it's coming, you know? And that's because most good content will separate people. You know, it's like Marmite. If everyone's like, yeah, you know, you're not going to get views because it's like, it's already so obvious. You have to say something that challenges people, makes them think, separates people, that kind of stuff. But yeah, so before I would like engage with these people, I'd be like trying to slag them off too, and then there'd be this whole like, you know, they're talking about me, I'm talking about them, and I'd feel horrible at the end of it. And then other people that come onto the video will see this negativity and it's not good for them either. So then after talking to my girlfriend, I was like, yeah, I'm going to say this, I'm going to say that to this guy. She was like, but why? Like, is that who you want to be? And I was like, no. And she's like, well, then just don't do it. And I was like, I don't know what am I supposed to just block them? I don't want to just block them. I want to like...
dominate them.
I don't even want to dominate them. I just think like, you know, like if the world we live in is without consequences, then people will do whatever they want. So like, you know, this is one of the reasons community is so important in real life. It's like, because if you have a community of people, like old people, young people, then there will be some sort of set of inbuilt corrections. You know, if you're like being rude or outrageous, like you'll be told like, hey, like, you know, calm it down. And people don't do that as much now. And online, there's not so much checking either of like, hey, like, I'm a human, you're a human, like, let's have some respect. So I think that was my intention, but it got lost in like, you know, you start out like, I'm going to like teach them a lesson. And then you're like, you know, you're on the floor biting them in the face, you know? So like, instead of trying to navigate that hairy situation, I was like, I'm going to go full positivity. You know, they might say like, you're an absolute moron. And I'd be like, hey, like, I'm just reviewing an ad. Like, if that's your reaction, that you probably haven't had the best day. Like, I hope tomorrow is like a better day for you.
Yeah.
or I'd maybe say something like, is this really how you want to be, like slagging people off in TikTok comments? Like, you know, just something that's more positive and like shows an alternative. And I've done that a lot more and have been surprised that I haven't had a single... I was so stressed when I sent the first one because it's this feeling of vulnerability, you know, where
Right.
by doing that, it feels soft, you know, it feels like you're opening yourself up to them being like,
Yep.
you absolute like nerd, you know. But they would either just delete their comment or be like, actually, you know what, you're right. And I'm still so shocked that is the response. But I think people live hard lives and they're unable to regulate themselves. And so when they see a piece of content that for whatever reason makes them feel jealous, or maybe they just don't agree.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with saying like, actually, I think your idea is wrong. That's fine. It's more like when they attack the person.
Yeah, exactly.
They lose themselves in that. And if you have the grace to say it in a nice way and genuinely care, and I don't always do this, sometimes I now just block them because it takes energy on my part to like, you know, someone's like, you absolute fool, and you have to go, I love you.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
that takes a lot of energy. So I don't always do it, but I try not to respond negatively. So that's been something I've changed my mind on. It's been a little life-changing because I think you can take that offline as well and disarm people that are being aggressive or rude by assuming the positive and showing love and kindness. Yeah.
We've arrived at the last question. And that question is, what does the future hold for Yasin?
I cannot predict the future. So I don't know. But I hope that in a year from now, let's say, I have a thriving community of short form content creators, all helping each other grow. And yeah, I think that's the main thing. And that supports me and is enough for me to like live a comfortable life. And that I've taken all of the lessons from that community to both help other people grow and develop and build businesses through those platforms, but also to help me level up and be like a really big creator on a bunch of different channels. I don't know what I think the number ultimately is arbitrary, but I want to get to a point where I feel like I make a piece of content with a level of confidence that I'm telling the story in the best way possible. And I haven't got to that point yet. And yeah, so it's just more reps and more reading about storytelling, more time in the community, more feedback. And I think day by day, I get closer to understanding what it means to be an incredible storyteller. Yeah, but I won't have arrived next year, but that's kind of like, I want to be in a like good place where I consider myself to be making great stories, and on my way to making exceptional stories and helping other people do the same thing.
Thanks so much for your time. It was an awesome chat. I really enjoyed it.
Pleasure.
I'm curious to see how this progresses, and we'll be joining the TikTok community.
Sounds good. Yeah, amazing.
Thanks so much, man.